Well, welcome to the Professional Insights Series, Careers in Education. I'm very excited to introduce you to our three esteemed panelists who are all SHEP alums and current educators. I will start with you, Jennifer. If you could tell us your name, where you're from originally, and where you went for your undergrad, that'd be awesome.
So I am Jennifer Covey. I am originally from Albany, Kentucky. I'm still living in Kentucky. And I'm sorry, I forgot the last question.
That's okay. Where'd you do your undergrad?
Oh, I did my undergrad at Berea College.
Okay, awesome. All right, Danny, you're up.
Hey everybody, I'm Danny Murray. I went undergrad actually at the same school as Danielle and Cami. And yeah, I was a Shepherd alum as well.
And where are you from?
Oh, sorry. I'm from New Jersey originally, and now I teach in Newark, New Jersey.
How about you, Allison?
I'm Alison Masson. I did my undergrad at Washington University, and I'm originally from New Jersey.
Oh, fun.
Alison, nice. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Very cool. All right. So the next question has to do with SHEP, which makes sense since we're all here in honor of SHEP, so to speak. So I'm curious to know why you wanted to do a SHEP internship, when you did it, and where. We can go in reverse order, maybe.
Sure. I was thinking about that question. Why did I want to do a SHEP internship? I was always planning on being a poverty studies minor at Washington and Lee, and of course it's required for the minor. But I think I really just wanted to get to know what poverty looks like in places totally foreign to me. I grew up in a pretty rural area in New Jersey, but I'd spent some time on service trips during my freshman year of college in DC and in Baltimore. And so I kind of was hoping to go somewhere else and see, what the experience of poverty looks like in other places. And so I ended up in Navajo Nation in Arizona, just about as far as I could possibly go. And I spent half of my time there in Sanders, Arizona. We were working on a summer program that was a school had just funded this program. It was running for the first time for the first summer, and it was a social emotional development program for middle schoolers and high schoolers in Navajo Nation who lived local to the Sanders Valley School District. And then I spent about the other half of my time at St. Anne's Mission in Clargato, Arizona, working with kids, high schoolers, mostly from the East Coast that were there on mission trips and helping them organize the Bible school and just keep the mission running over the summer.
Wow. Well, I have about 1 million follow-up questions, but I'm going to hold them so we can get around and then we'll keep going. So Danny, would you like to go next?
Sure. I did my Shepherd internship at a charter school in Brooklyn. And why did I do it? Like Allison, it was a requirement, but I'm so glad that I did. I had no idea that I wanted to get involved in education. In fact, it wasn't really on my radar at all, but it definitely changed my career trajectory and really changed my life. I wouldn't say I had the easiest Shepherd experience. I thought I was going to be doing something curriculum based, but I ended up being the jack of all trades. I was the receptionist at one point, the school nurse. I ran bus duty. But I did see the holistic nature of education and that you're really serving the whole child, and I was hooked.
Wow. Okay, Jennifer, take it away.
Gotcha. Sorry, my computer keeps freezing every
Oh yeah.
couple seconds. So I'm just sitting here staring. It's just because it's frozen. But okay, I did my SHEP internship in 2017 in Baltimore, Maryland with Parks and People. Like Danny and Allison, I did my internship because it was a requirement with the program I was in. But I had grown up in a very rural area, had done all of my clinical work within a rural area, and so I was really interested to see how education looks on the flip side, so on that urban side. So when I was in Baltimore working with Parks and People, we worked with a camp called Super Kids, and so we worked with kindergartners through fifth grader, and it just really opened my eyes to how different the field of education can be, especially in a rural and an urban urban setting.
Wow. Well, I heard a lot of themes. Obviously, your internships were tied to education and to youth in a variety of ways. And I'm curious what your undergraduate majors were and if you planned to go into like Danny specifically stated that he wasn't planning to go into education before the internship. For you, for Jennifer and Allison, was that a turning point? What were you studying before the internship? And what did you study after?
I also had no idea that I wanted to teach. It was not on my radar at all. I started as a politics major. I finished as a politics major, actually, with an education minor. Yeah, I had no idea that working with kids is what would make me happy. I don't know that I was necessarily focused on what would make me happy when I was a freshman in college. I think I was focused on what would make me impressive. But it brought me a lot of joy. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to spend my life doing what brings me joy. And so I took my first education class when I came back from my internship.
And I, like before coming to college, had no idea I wanted to be in education. I knew I wanted to work with children in some capacity. And it wasn't until my sophomore year of college when I really started to dive deep into my education classes and get that experience that I knew I wanted to work with children. And so I got my bachelor's in elementary ed with a certification to teach kindergarten through 5th grade.
How about you, Danny? Did you change your major?
I didn't. I was an English major, so I kept on keeping on, but I joined Teach for America. So for everyone listening, there are all alternative certification programs out there, not just TFA, but a lot of other good ones. So listen, we need great teachers. If you want to be a teacher, don't let your undergrad get in the way. In fact, I would argue that your undergrad experience, especially because so many of the SHECP alum come from liberal arts schools, is going to serve you in the classroom in so many ways. And then you can figure out the teaching thing as you go along. I know, I think I did, but yeah, it's definitely a lifelong journey.
Allison, did you have you said you did an urban education fellowship when we were talking earlier. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I just in May graduated from, it's called the Urban Catholic Teacher Corps at Boston College. And so it's a postgraduate 2-year teaching fellowship. There are a whole bunch of schools, particularly Catholic schools, Catholic colleges, that have programs like this. But the one at Boston College, you have to be a licensed teacher. You have to have finished a teacher education program to participate. So there were, in my cohort of the program, there were 12 of us altogether. And it's basically a community that you go through your first 2 years of teaching with and that you complete your master's degree with. So we all in these 2 years were placed at a Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Boston, and we had a 2-year commitment to that school. We earned our master's degree from Boston College. Boston College housed us together, which is interesting. So during your first 2 years of teaching, living with like 17 teachers in a convent in Dorchester is a pretty wild experience, but it was something really cool to be able to come home, you know, with our stories from all over the Archdiocese and bring them back together and learn from each other and suffer together through the moments that are difficult, you know, but it was a really neat way to do my first 2 years and earned our master's degrees along the way.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a nice segue into sort of the life of a teacher and the life cycle of the year. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, could you tell us what you teach, what grade level, and remind us where? And Jennifer, I'll start with you.
I teach 2nd and 3rd grade math, science, and writing, and I teach at a small school in central Kentucky called Waynesburg Elementary in Lincoln County.
Would you consider that a rural or urban area?
Oh, very rural, 100%.
Okay. How about you, Danny?
I teach at a charter school in Newark, New Jersey called North Star Academy at their Washington Park campus. I kind of hit the lottery because when I joined Teach for America, I ended up at North Star, and I've been there ever since. I've taught a lot. I've taught 8th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Currently, I'm the English department chair. So unfortunately, I do more coaching and instructional leadership and curriculum development than I do teaching, but I still have one class. So I'm never going to not have my foot in the classroom. It's my favorite hour to 2 hours of every day.
And you, Allison?
I teach 9th grade world history and 12th grade psychology at Cardinal Spellman High School. It's in Brockton, Massachusetts. So it's in a city. It's an urban school, and we serve urban and suburban students.
Great, perfect. We have a nice mix. And you may recall over the summer, we were studying the geography of poverty. And we were looking at how poverty is neither a rural nor urban issue, but really spans the whole spectrum from rural to urban, suburban, and everything in between. And I think that was a great topic, especially during the pandemic. So that leads me into this next question of, we talked rural, we talked urban, we talked suburban. How does teaching in this current moment interact with geography and your experiences as a teacher? Anyone can start.
I can go first. So I teach in a very urban area, and I think suburban America has a lot of issues that urban America doesn't. So we have close proximity to school for the most part, which is nice, although kids are getting bused from different parts of the city. But in terms of what it means to teach during COVID, I think the big one is availability of space and learning spaces. Mm-hmm. So before the pandemic, really was widespread, our school did like a 24-hour scramble, and we gave out over 500 Chromebooks and like 200 hotspots to our school community, because we knew that the availability of technology would be a major detriment to student learning. And even then, it's just the reality that bandwidth is an issue, and when your laptop is your classroom, it provides a major detriment to student learning. So that's one variable. The other variable is, I don't know about you, but doing your day-to-day job over Zoom is difficult in a living space. Like, I'm in my bedroom right now, and my wife is in our living room where there's a desk, and we live in a small 600 square foot apartment. And even then, I struggle sometimes to get my job done. Now imagine if you have 4 or 5 siblings and you're in a 2-bedroom apartment. Those aren't conducive learning environments, and those are some of the best ones. So it is a struggle each and every day, and I'm just thankful the kids show up and engage and are doing the best they can given the circumstances.
I know space has been a huge factor during this experience, and sound, like the real estate that it takes up for one person to be talking near someone else in a somewhat confined space, was something I didn't appreciate before being at home with 2 other people who were trying to do Zoom and talk on the phone and all of that. Luckily, when the weather was nicer, people could start going outside. But I know in the Northeast, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, it was still prohibitively cold for people to be sitting anywhere but indoors. Alison, was your experience similar with students having kind of spatial constraints within the home? And I know Danny talked about the distribution of Chromebooks. Did your students already have individual technological devices prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, they did. We're a one-to-one device school, so every student has a device, and having the confidence that our kids all, had a device, and it made the transition to virtual learning a little bit easier. Right now, I guess, I don't know, are we coming out of the pandemic? We're acting like we are, I guess, coming out of virtual learning for us, because right now we are in a hybrid model where we have half the kids at home and half the kids in the classroom, with the half that's at home zooming in, hoping to move to a fully in-person model soon. Transportation is a big issue right now. When I think about the different ways that our kids get to school, it's kind of incredible. There are kids that take the bus for an hour and a half from Dorchester and then walk a half a mile from the bus stop to get to our school. There are kids that can always depend on their parents to drop them off. There are kids that depend on each other for carpooling. And that's been a huge consideration, especially thinking about a hybrid model, where we have two cohorts in our school, and half the school is in one and half the school is in the other, right? It just adds like a whole nother dimension to the kids who are trying to figure out carpooling because we don't have our own bus system, and kids do travel from far away. And so I think navigating transportation for school with the added complexity of not having, the whole student body to rely on, but only having now your cohort to rely on, and the ways that, parents' jobs have been changing over this time, and parents' availability has been changing over this time, has, I think, created for the opportunity for more adaptability, if we can spin it in a positive way, and more innovation, but absolutely a great challenge for our students.
Wow, the transportation piece is something that, schools that are all remote right now aren't really facing in the same way, but I can only imagine the burden that places on people's minds when they think about potential exposure. Like if a child is taking a public bus for an hour and a half each way every day, that's very different than riding in a private vehicle with only your parent who you also share a living space with. Wow. Thank you for adding that component to this discussion, for sure. And Jennifer, you said that it's been remote, but it's going in person next week. Is that right?
Yes. So we are remote up until Monday is going to be our first day with the hybrid model. And so this week has been gearing up for that. And like Alison and Danny have talked about, it comes with its challenges. So some of our students who are choosing to stay at home, they don't have access to Wi-Fi, so they've been doing the workbooks. And our district did pass out hotspots, but there weren't enough hotspots for all the families that requested. And so it's been a big period of grace, especially for the students who are completing workbook assignments, because we are one-to-one with students with grades 3 through 12th grade. And so our K1s and 2s are all completing workbook work. And so they're submitting the pictures either through email, or they're actually dropping the pages off that they're completing at school, but then they have to sit for the 72 hours. So it has just been a big thing of grace for everybody involved. Grace from the parents with us getting assignments back to students, grace from the teachers with completing assignments. It's been a whirlwind. And last year was my first year of teaching, and so I got broken real well.
One you will never forget.
Of course not.
No one will. So you've touched on some of the equity issues, and I wonder if we could talk about that a bit more broadly. Obviously, the pandemic brought many of those to the surface, but even before COVID, how were some of the things that you thought when you went into teaching confirmed by your experiences, and how were other preconceived notions or assumptions you had about what teaching would be like tossed out the window when you actually got there to school?
Now we're getting to the good stuff, Danielle.
Yeah, we're trying. And Danny, you've been at the same school the longest, so maybe you have, a magnifying glass on this, as you've had multiple sort of generations in a way of 7th graders and 8th graders, and then they've progressed through 12th grade. You've seen kids graduate now, right? Like since
years
ago.
I've had 3 different groups of students who I saw graduate who I originally taught in 8th grades. That's been really special. But I'm not trying to skate. I will answer your question, which is a difficult one. So I think the caveat I can provide is I knew nothing about teaching and what poverty actually looked like. So everything was a surprise, because even with the Shepherd program, and even with service learning components that's so crucial to all of our universities, you don't know what it's like to work in a school until you do it on a day in, day out basis. And then the nature of school is that it's ever evolving. And so each year provides its own set of challenges, and things that you think you know and that are definite rules that apply are actually confirmed to be totally wrong in the next year. And so I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I would argue that it's always evolving and you're always learning. And if you stop learning as an educator, you probably should just stop being a teacher, because you're not doing it right. You don't have a humble mindset. But to actually answer the question, so I guess one thing that I went in. So I went with a very privileged and naive perspective around urban education is. And so, you know, I thought it was all like waiting for Superman. I thought that's what urban education looked like. I was wrong, because you don't realize everything that goes into a child's success. So if I had to distill one thing I didn't realize, that is the importance of parental involvement. And this is coming from someone whose school oftentimes thinks like, you're with me 12 hours a day. If we do everything we can to dictate the terms and perfect the conditions of your educational experience, you'll be destined for, you know, the college of your choice. That's nice. However, partnering with a family is probably the most important thing you can do as an educator, because ultimately where that child comes from, their culture, their experience, their family life is the number one determinant of their success in your classroom. So if you're going in thinking that you're a savior and that you're going to ignore what life is outside the classroom, A, that's ignorant, but B, you're just not going to be a very effective teacher. So getting to know families and working more in that direction has probably been one of the more influential ways that I've changed my instruction, and that my ignorance has been replaced by just humility.
Go for it. Jump right in.
I was just waiting to see if anyone was going to speak before I did. But although my degree is in education, I don't feel like anything can really prepare you for the field of teaching. It doesn't matter how many education classes you've had. It's not until you're in the nitty-gritty of the world of school and education that you really understand what it's like and what it is to be a teacher. And one big thing that I've really noticed, especially through this time of COVID, is how flexible you need to be as an educator. During this time of COVID and uncertainty, like, no one really knows what to expect and no one has the right answers for anything. And so coming in each day, like, I really don't know what to expect. For instance, I was just supposed to teach writing at the beginning of the year. Now I'm a math teacher as of last week. And so having that spirit of flexibility and just knowing that, you know, things are going to happen, you need to roll with the punches. Like, that was mentioned within in my teacher prep program, but it's not something that you really understand until you're in the classroom in front of 24 kids and they're like, okay, what now?
I think coming out of, you know, a teacher education program and then a master's degree in education, something I've kind of come to learn that maybe I didn't expect is that everyone has a different opinion on what good teaching looks like. There are, you know, there are empirical studies. There's lots of research that has changed dramatically over the last 10 years about what good teaching looks like. And coming into the profession, I think I could imagine in my head what I would look like as a good teacher, or what I thought I would look like as a good teacher. And I learned really quickly that it takes a really long time to become, you know, the teacher that maybe you imagine yourself as, and that's okay. And B, everyone's going to have a different opinion to offer, but kind of just have to take it all in, sort through it, figure out what works for you, what works for your students, because teaching is highly personal too.
And one of the things that Danny pointed out was poverty. So like looking at diversity and equity through a socioeconomic lens. I'm wondering about some of the other differences you see in terms of what helps students thrive versus some of those who may have factors in their lives that are out of their control that hold them back from achieving their full potential. Maybe Jennifer?
Sorry, your question had cut in and out, so I didn't hear the entire question.
No problem. So the question was, you know, we think about poverty often through a socioeconomic lens. And I'm wondering if there are other factors that you see that either contribute to certain students' success or detract from their achievement of their fullest potential. Like if we take class out of it, what are some of those other things that have an impact on your children, your students, ability to succeed as you define it or how they define it?
Gotcha. So taking the socioeconomic status out of it, I think kind of touching on what Danny said about parent involvement, like goes heavy onto how students perform and how they kind of see themselves. Because I have several students who are just not very confident in themselves and their abilities. And when you talk to the parents, you can hear the parents kind of talking about their children in that same way. So the words that the adults that are being said to them in their households, that's what they're internalizing. That's what they think about themselves. And so when they step foot in the classroom, it's trying to undo all of those words and showing them that they have the ability and that they aren't being hindered by other outside sources or even things that family members may be saying.
That's really helpful. Alison, what do you see?
Can I ask you to repeat the question one more time?
Sure. So I'm thinking about it in terms of factors that help children achieve their fullest potential, and also some of the factors that might detract from it. So, sometimes we think about poverty through a narrow, like socioeconomic lens, but I would argue, and I think research supports this, that there are a lot of other factors that at play in terms of children sort of beating the odds or achieving great feats, even if they come from a socioeconomically disadvantaged place. So I was wondering if you could talk about some of those factors from your experience.
I'm thinking about, it's kind of like a catchphrase right now in education, culturally relevant pedagogy. In terms of what I see is helping the students at my school succeed is valuing their family, their culture, their family knowledge as a part of especially a history curriculum, right? When I allowed them and their families to share their stories related to maybe the topic we're studying is immigration, right? They have a lot to offer there. And I've seen some of my students that have really struggled to perform in the classroom when given the opportunity to speak about their family and their family story and relate that to their education. I've seen them really like shine, like really like light up in a new way with a particular passion. And I think keeping in the front of their minds, I guess, their purpose and their passion that it has a place in education has been a game changer for some of my lower performing students.
That seems so relevant for this moment too. That idea of, people having strengths and people with diverse perspectives adding value as opposed to being, corrected or forced to adjust to a mold of what might have been considered mainstream in the past. I think there's a much more nuanced perception now. Danny, do you have anything to add?
I would just say that achievement's rooted in opportunity. So one of the aspects that is most crucial to a child's success or achieving that potential is opportunity. So opportunity to extracurricular activities, opportunity to assume leadership and positions of value in the school, opportunities to, as Alison mentioned, find out who they are as a person beyond the academic courses that they're taking. And so a successful school, regardless of, income and poverty levels and demographics, will definitely enable a diversity of opportunities so that every kid can find something that they can really sink their teeth into. So on personal experience, like as cliche as it sounds, but I was once a former athlete, my students who, when they're in season, have an opportunity to prove their value to their team by making sure that they're academically eligible, you should see the difference in their performance. Same child, same circumstances, inside and outside the classroom, there's one variable that changes: basketball season. And that opportunity to rise to the occasion and be a good teammate and be a good athlete changes everything. But it also comes down to, getting students input and figuring out what clubs they want to do. We have a system called Project, where Tuesday and Thursday, students have like a student-led club, essentially, where an expert comes in and offers some guidance. And it's all about the students. There's no teacher involved. And it's amazing to see what kids kind of latch onto once they're given the opportunity. They don't realize that they love something. Like, we partnered with a local glass blowing company in Newark, and students who you'd never think would enjoy that. And now they're, getting into design as a potential major for their college. So to sum it up, just opportunities. And the lack of opportunities can have the same inverse effect, unfortunately.
Wow. Can definitely see some parallels between access to opportunity and justice, like the equity of experience and the inequities too, which have nothing to do with the child and where they were born, or, nothing to do with the child because they don't have a choice in where they're born or who their parents are. But education has the opportunity to really serve as a leveling space if provided with the right resources and the right leadership support. All right, so I have a few other questions, but the first one I'd like to start with is work-life balance. So we've talked about Danny's 12-hour school day. We've talked about starting early in the morning, working from home, working at school. Is the life of a teacher outside of the school building what you expected?
What life outside of school?
I think that's so true, because even when you're outside of the school, like, I feel like that identity of teacher follows you in every aspect of your life. Like, when I'm hanging out with my friends, like grabbing dinner, they always bring up like my career and teaching and everything. So I feel like no matter where I am, that identity always follows me. And so last year, which granted it was my first year, I had a really hard time with trying to find that balance of leaving work at work and not bringing everything home with me. I had a really bad habit of staying super late and getting to school super early. And I teach 45 minutes away from where I live. And so I was just coming home to sleep pretty much. And so when COVID hit and we were teaching from home, it really made me reevaluate how I was taking care of myself and my well-being. And I think that's very important for the teaching profession. I feel like that's why so many people get burnt out after a few years, is they get so consumed with education and so consumed with taking care of their students and everything that they need that they lose themselves. And so in a way, COVID was a blessing, because it allowed me to slow down and to reevaluate my priorities and to find that work-life balance. Now, it's not there completely, but I'm a whole lot better now than I was this time last school year.
I share that sentiment, Jennifer, that it was a really important checkpoint for me when we were suddenly virtual. Actually, I had so much more time on my hands than I did before, to be quite honest. And I realized that I really wasn't taking care of myself in those first 2 years of teaching the way I should have been. And now, right, being out of the grad program, I have a little bit of a slower pace. I have a little bit more free time. And I'm seeing that in just doing something, making a change as simple as getting 8 hours of sleep a night. I'm a better teacher for my kids. So maybe it is still all about teaching, but taking care of myself and making sure that I do have an appropriate work-life balance makes me a better worker, a better teacher too. But it took a while to get there.
Yeah, that's it. Be the person you need to be so you can be the teacher that you need to be. And it's tough. It's a tough balance. I think it's especially tough for the type of people who join the Shepherd program, because they have two things in common. They're ambitious and they also care a ton. And so the one thing you have to tell yourself every day is that this profession is all encompassing, and the issues of equity and educational outcomes are all consuming as well. So you're not going to solve that overnight. but your students need your best every day. So not advocating that you cut corners, but you have to be realistic with your locus of control. Otherwise, as Jennifer mentioned, you're going to get burnt out, and we need teachers for the long haul. Mm-hmm. We don't need superheroes in the short term.
Who come in and swoop out just as quickly. All right, so this one's a little bit more futuristic, and you may not have the answer, and that's totally fine. But I'm curious to know more about where you see yourselves in 5 years or 10 years. Like, where are you headed, knowing what you know now?
Hopefully in the classroom. I think that's the key. I'm on year 8, but it feels like year 80. But I mean that because every year has its own kind of life to it. So it seems like you live a new life kind of every year, which is part of the value. So I want to stay as close to the classroom as possible. That's like really, really important to me. I feel like a lot of people who get disenchanted with the career, it's because they get caught up in things that aren't related to kids. And naturally, you might need to step out of the classroom if you want to assume leadership, or if you want to assume even things like policy or whatever, whoever's listening to this, whatever path in education, there's so many different paths too. So you're not a bad teacher or a bad person if you leave the classroom after a few years. That experience will always be with you and will influence the way that you live your life. So this is not a critique of people who take that path. But I guess we're remaining true to why we do this work, right? Like it's for kids. And so whatever, I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know, but I know I want to be involved with kids in some capacity.
I'm kind of like Danny. I really do not know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I would like to be opportunistic and think that I'm going to be in the classroom working on my craft and everything, but you don't know what the future holds. I do know I want to work with students in some capacity, whether that be inside of the classroom, whether that be as an instructional coach or something to that nature. But I do see myself still in a school setting within 5 years.
And I'm really not sure either. I'm happy, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm happy teaching my kids. I'm happy at my school. And I think those are the most important things. Like, I think if you had asked me 5 years ago, I don't know that I would have said that I want to be a high school teacher and I want to be at a Catholic school and I want to be in Massachusetts. But I think who I was 5 years ago would be happy with where I am right now. And I don't know what's after, but I think it would take a lot to draw me away from where I am right now.
All right, audience members, Jim and Cammie, do you have any questions for our panelists? No pressure.
I'm going to let Cammie go first while I think about it. That's a cop-out, right?
Definitely a cop-out. I don't have a question. I'm more just like a general comment. Like, this is so refreshing to hear from, you could argue, someone who like sold their soul to the law, like corporate America. So it's really refreshing just to hear everyone, in such just amazing life impacting roles that y'all are in, and to see just how, I don't know, I'm very, like, it's so cool to see like a classmate like Danny, like, oh my gosh, here you are. When did we graduate? Like 7 years ago, and look at you. And you've had like 6 classes of kids graduate. And I don't know. I'm just like, I'm very just humbled by you guys and just so in awe. So like, I know it sounds cliche and maybe you hate hearing this, but like, thank you for all you guys do. Cause I'm sure y'all don't hear it enough.
Thanks, Cammie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've got a daughter and son-in-law, husband-wife team, who both teach. My son-in-law teaches, he's got a PhD in history and went to teach high school in a small rural town in North Georgia. And my daughter teaches art in the same school. And so that's terrific. But, I hear from them, these pressures right now, that they're under in terms of the COVID issues and all those other things. And so, but that professionalism and the structure, of what's required in that environment is it's a wonderful thing. But maintaining that balance of enthusiasm for what you're doing in the classroom and having to deal with the management of the structure of the testing and all the other aspects that come in play there is a challenge. But so this is, I guess it's more of a comment that yes, I am also in awe of your energy that you put forward in that, and the pride that I can see that you take in what you do. And so I guess one question I'd ask is as you are counseling and mentoring, new folks who might be thinking about this as a career, would you suggest that they try to find an opportunity somewhere where they can try out what it's like in the classroom? Certainly, that's as you say, Danny, that's the energy part that you really like more than anything else. And so, I guess it's finding a way to get them hooked on that energy piece. Is that fair? And I would ask that for all of you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Get in the classroom, start working with kids. That's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. I think all of us that are in this work are in this work because we met one child who we really connected with and wanted to work with them further and other kids like them. And then the other thing I would say to add on to your point, Jim, is if you have an experience where you work in one school setting and that setting, the school, its structure, its philosophy, its mission is not for you, don't be discouraged, because one thing we haven't mentioned that I think is so crucial is that your school setting can determine so much in terms of your day-to-day experience. Mm-hmm. And if a potential shepherd teacher out there gets put in one school setting or finds themselves working in one school setting and feels burnt out and doesn't have that energy, doesn't have that drive, that doesn't mean there's not a school out there that works for you. Kids across our country need great teachers. So just find if you're committed to this work or you think you're committed to this work, just find the right leadership. That's super crucial. Find a school leader or leadership team that you really believe in, and just find a school that shares the same values as you.
And it's worth noting that all of you are in different types of school settings, right? Alison, yours is a private school, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
And Danny's at a charter school. Jennifer, are you at a public school?
I am at a public school.
Well, we did that, right? Perfect recruitment.
And cross-section too of types of things you're teaching and levels and all those things, yeah. So.
And Danny touched on this, and feel free to add on, Jennifer and Alison. For SHEP students who are out there or recent graduates, what would you say to them about next steps and thinking about pursuing careers in education at this moment in our history?
I think I would just say to be flexible and to just be open. I graduated mid-year from Berea, and so I applied to some teaching jobs. After I graduated in December, nothing came up, so I subbed a little bit. And I think that was just a very valuable experience because it allowed me to get my foot into the school system and to see what classrooms are like without managing my own classroom first. And so don't be discouraged. I know, especially on the elementary level, it can be difficult to find teaching positions because there's just so many of us elementary ed majors, but don't be discouraged. Just be flexible, be open, and it'll all work.
Yeah, I would also say dipping your toes in is a good way to get started, and I think around most college campuses there's a lot of opportunity to connect with schools locally, is my understanding, in terms of mentoring programs that you might be able to volunteer with, or tutoring programs that you might be able to help out with. There's a lot of opportunity through churches. Maybe if you're involved in a church to, for example, teach Sunday school or religious education of that sort. My first sort of in-classroom experience, besides my practicum in Lexington, I worked at a boarding school over the summer, and a lot of boarding schools will have like teaching interns for their summer schools. And so that's an easy way to kind of get started, get a little bit of time in the classroom, but it's only for, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Yeah, dip your toes in.
See if you like it. That's perfect.
I'll just leave you one anecdote. I in another life, I teach archaeology to the public and take kids out in the field and do these archaeology projects. And so that's really not fair, because that's a lot of fun. I get to do that outdoors and the kids are all, awake and enjoying all that. But I've learned some valuable things about that and about teaching, in that, that there are kids that, and this from your classroom experience, there are always one or two or three kids where the light bulb goes on, and it may be only on one day, or it may be only on a particular week, and it's a different kid every week or a different day. But boy, I found great joy in that, in that sometimes just that one kid, or two, with that enthusiasm and that energy that you saw from that kid. And you knew the others had that too, and you catch them on a different day, and you see that light bulb go on with them too. So, I guess the point is there are light bulbs everywhere. There's energy everywhere out there, and finding the right switch and the right moment, for those kids is a very rewarding experience. The little that I've had out there. So, again, I'm in admiration of your work every day.
We so appreciate your time, all of you. I hope that many people will get access to this recording. And should they have questions, I'll be happy to send them your way for advice and what have you. Can we part on the note of Alison's experience with the Navajo Nation and that specific placement? I don't know about all of you, but I'm like totally intrigued to learn more about that. Kind of take us through that a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, so the summer that I went out there, I was with another student from Washington and Lee and a student from Middlebury, so there were three of us. And it was the first time that this summer program was running. It was kind of just proposed by one of the teachers at the school. There was a connection through Washington and Lee to some of the counselors, the psychologists at this high school. And that's how I think we got connected through the Shepherd program there. And so there wasn't really like a clear plan. Like it was kind of just, we're going to fly to Albuquerque. Somebody's going to pick us up. Somehow we're going to have a vehicle. We're staying. We don't really know where we're staying. So a lot of the details were very fuzzy even leading up to it. And we ended up, we were living at the Native American Baha'i Institute. So it's a center for the Baha'i faith in Navajo Nation. And we were running this summer program that we kind of built from scratch with the vision of some community leaders out at the school cafeteria. We didn't know who was going to show up. We didn't know on any given day whether kids were going to come back from the day before. And I think one of the coolest things, though, was it was very focused on using the local Navajo culture to help students to move into a transition, right, to adulthood, especially for the teenagers. And so one of the things that we would do is there was a horse ranch right next to the school, and the woman who owned the ranch taught our kids natural horsemanship. So she would teach them like not horseback riding, but how to lead a horse. And we would talk about how you take those skills of leading a horse and you lead people. We would use the talking circle, which is a traditional practice of sitting and listening to each other as a practice for sharing openly and listening to the people in your community. And it was just very focused on sort of encouraging these kids to become the community that they want to be a part of. And I remember in the middle of the summer having a Skype conversation with Dr. Beckley, and he was really pressing us on what are the economic opportunities in Navajo Nation? Where do you see economic development happening? And the interns were like, we don't know. we're not seeing that. That's not really what we're doing. It's not what we're a part of right now, right? Maybe economic development is in the future, but it's going to start with a strong community and helping these kids become a community and live out the community values that they want to see and that they want to be a part of. And I think that's more the focus that our program had.
I love that. And I love that sense of adventure and just trusting that there's going to be something beautiful at the end of the runway. Literally, I mean, you fly out, you don't really know what to expect, and you're going to have an experience of some kind. And you had a big part in making that a positive one, because of course, you know, attitude is everything in new situations. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you know, do you have a desire to continue teaching in that sort of setting, which was atypical, so to speak?
Yeah, it's funny because my boss from my internship just out of the blue in March gave me a call, and he said he just thought of me and thought he would check in and see how I'm doing, you know, where's my career at, and definitely encouraged me to come back. You know, they're always looking for teachers, but teachers who are willing to stay. And I think that's the part that makes it difficult, is knowing that I don't at this point have, you know, family there, a community there. Would I be willing to stay if I went back? I would love to, but I don't want to be that superhero that swoops in and swoops out, like we kind of said before. So my hesitation is myself and knowing that, you know, my family is back here on the East Coast. But it did definitely inspire me a particular academic interest in Native American history. And that was something I really took out of my time there. And I went and took classes in the sociology department at Washington and Lee. And I was able to go up to Lakota Reservation and spend some time there during one of our spring terms. And so there was a lot that came out of that for me, and in a lot of directions.
Fabulous. Love that. Any parting thoughts this evening?
Just thank you. Thanks for hosting it. Thanks for giving teachers a voice. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So glad to have all of you, and so nice to meet you. For those I haven't met before, this was absolutely a pleasure. Sort of to echo Cammie's point, it's really refreshing to have conversations about what inspires us and brings joy and provides passion and purpose to life. Sometimes we get a little distracted, and so it's nice to hear all of you reflecting on what keeps you going every day and teaching kids, which is a super important job.
Thanks for doing this at the end of a school day.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. Well, on that note, I'll wish everyone a pleasant evening. Stay safe and stay in touch. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.